The rain came down in sheets that night at Fort Henderson, turning the training grounds into a muddy battlefield. Lieutenant Kate Morrison crouched behind a barricade, her rifle steady despite the water streaming down her face. She'd been holding this position for 3 hours, waiting for her team to circle back for extraction. They never came. Kate had served with Bravo Company for 2 years, proving herself time and again. She'd grown up in a small Nebraska town, where her father ran the local hardware store and her mother taught at the elementary school. Joining the Army had been her dream since she was a girl watching veterans march in the 4th of July parade. She wanted to serve, to protect, to be part of something bigger than herself. But from the day she arrived at Fort Henderson, Captain Derek Stone made it clear women didn't belong in his unit. He was old-school military, a man who believed combat was no place for a female soldier, no matter how skilled she proved to be. His disapproval infected the team like a poison. During that training exercise, Kate had completed her objective flawlessly. She'd taken out every target with precision that left the range instructors speechless. Her spotter, Corporal Tim Hayes, had radioed the team their position. They were supposed to regroup at checkpoint Delta Dot, but when Kate and Tim reached the checkpoint, drenched and exhausted, the trucks were gone. Tim grabbed his radio. "Bravo 1, this is Bravo 3. We're at Delta. Where's our ride?" Static. Then Captain Stone's voice crackled through. "Bravo 3, return to base on foot. We have limited transport." Kate took the radio from Tim's hand. "Sir, we're 6 miles out in the storm. We completed the mission ahead of schedule." "Morrison, you wanted to be treated like one of the boys, didn't you?" Stone's voice was cold, dismissive. "Then walk back like the rest of us would have to. Maybe it'll teach you that war isn't a game." Tim looked at her, anger flashing in his eyes. "That's not right, Lieutenant. The trucks aren't even full. I saw them leave." Kate watched the taillights disappear into the storm, taking with them any illusion she'd had about being accepted. She'd outperformed every member of that team. Her marksmanship scores were the highest in the battalion. She'd passed every physical test, carried her weight, and then some. But none of it mattered to Stone and the others who thought like him. "Let's move out," she said quietly, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. The walk back took 4 hours. The temperature dropped, and the rain turned icy. Tim stayed by her side, both of them pushing through exhaustion and cold. By the time they reached the base gates, Kate's entire body was numb. But her mind was clear, crystallized by the bitter truth she could no longer ignore. She wasn't wanted here. They would never see her as an equal. The next morning, soaked gear still hanging in her locker, Kate submitted her transfer papers. She requested reassignment to Naval Special Warfare Command, a move that raised eyebrows throughout the base. The SEAL training program had only recently opened to women, and the washout rate was astronomical. Captain Stone actually laughed when he heard. He caught her in the mess hall, his cronies surrounding him like a pack of wolves. "Morrison, you can barely handle Army standards, and you think you can make it through Bud S. That's SEAL training, sweetheart. You'll be crying for your mama by the end of week 1. Kate met his eyes without flinching. "I'll take my chances, sir." "Leave her?" Stone said to his men, waving dismissively. "Let her go embarrass herself somewhere else. One less problem for me." His words followed her as she walked away, but they didn't cut as deep as he'd intended. Something had shifted in Kate during that long walk through the storm. She'd been seeking acceptance from men who would never give it. Now she wanted something else entirely. She wanted to prove them all wrong. 3 weeks later, Kate stood on the beach at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, California, staring at the ocean that stretched endlessly before her. Around her, dozens of candidates prepared for the toughest military training program in the world. Most were men who'd spent years preparing for this moment. They looked at her with the same doubt she'd seen in Stone's eyes, but Kate wasn't the same woman who'd been abandoned in that storm. That night had burned away her need for approval and forged something harder in its place. She didn't need them to believe in her. She believed in herself. The instructor's whistle pierced the morning air. "Welcome to Buzz. Most of you won't be here in a week. Let's find out who has what it takes." Kate adjusted her gear and took her place in formation. The doubt, the mockery, the abandonment, she'd carry all of it through every mile, every dive, every impossible test they'd throw at her, and she'd use it as fuel. Hell Week arrived like a freight train. Kate had made it through the first month of basic underwater demolition, SEAL training, surviving when many had predicted her immediate failure. She'd endured the runs, the ocean swims, the endless physical trials designed to break the weak. But Hell Week was different. This was 5.5 days with almost no sleep, constant cold, and exercises meant to push candidates beyond human limits. By day 3, half the class had rung the bell, the brass bell that hung in the center of the compound, waiting for those who couldn't take any more. Each ring meant surrender, meant going home. Kate had watched men twice her size stumble over to that bell, tears streaming down their faces, and end their dreams with 3 strikes. She understood the temptation. Every muscle in her body screamed. Her hands were raw from rope burns. She'd been wet and cold for so long that she couldn't remember what warmth felt like. The instructors had a special interest in testing her limits, giving her extra attention that the other candidates noticed. "Morrison! 200 push-ups now," Senior Chief Alan Burke barked. He was a legend in the SEAL community, a man who'd seen combat in 3 different wars. Unlike Captain Stone, Burke didn't seem to hate her for being a woman. He simply didn't care. He treated everyone with the same brutal intensity. Kate rocked and started pushing. Her arms trembled, but she kept her form perfect. Around her, the class continued log drills, carrying heavy wooden logs in teams. The Pacific wind cut through her wet clothes like knives. "You know why you're here, Morrison?" Burke crouched beside her, his voice barely audible over the ocean waves. "Not the official reason. The real reason." Kate kept pushing. "To become a SEAL." "Senior Chief." "Wrong. You're here because someone told you that you couldn't be. I've seen your file. Top of your class in marksmanship. Excellent tactical scores. But you left a perfectly good Army unit because some captain with an ego problem left you in the rain." He paused. "That's not good enough." Kate's arms were shaking violently now, but she didn't stop. Burke's words cut deeper than the cold. "If you're doing this to prove something to Derek Stone or any other small-minded fool, you'll fail. You want to know why?" Burke stood up. "Because revenge burns hot and fast, but it doesn't last. When your body wants to quit at 3 in the morning on day 4, when every cell in your body is begging you to ring that bell, spite won't be enough to keep you going." Kate finished the push-ups and stood at attention, water dripping from her chin. Burke looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death and sacrifice. "You need a better reason to be here, Morrison. Find it before tomorrow, or you're done." That night, during the brief rest period they were allowed, Kate sat on the cold beach, wrapped in a wet poncho. Her body shook uncontrollably from hypothermia. Beside her, another candidate named Luis Rodriguez, a kid from Texas who reminded her of her younger brother, was in worse shape. "I don't think I can make it," Luis whispered, his teeth chattering. "My legs won't work right anymore." Kate looked at him through the fog of her own exhaustion. "Yes, you can. How do you do it?" he asked. "Everyone's watching you, waiting for you to fail. How do you keep going?" It was a good question. Kate thought about Captain Stone's dismissive laugh, about being left behind in that storm. Burke was right. She'd been running on anger and the need to prove her worth. But somewhere during these brutal days, something had changed. She thought about her hometown, about the small Nebraska community where everyone knew everyone. She remembered old Mr. Patterson, who'd lost his son in Afghanistan, standing at the memorial every Veterans Day with tears running down his weathered face. She thought about her mom's friend whose husband never came home from Iraq, who raised 3 kids alone with a folded flag on her mantle. "I keep going because someone has to," Kate said quietly. "Because there are people back home who need protecting, and they don't care if the person watching their back is a man or a woman. They just need someone good enough to do the job." Louise nodded slowly. "That's a better reason than mine. I just wanted to be tough." "You are tough," Kate told him. "You're still here." As the night wore on and the instructors roused them for another drill, Kate felt something shift inside her. Burke was right. She'd come here for the wrong reasons. But she'd found the right ones in the darkness and cold. She wasn't doing this to prove Derek Stone wrong anymore. She was doing this because somewhere, someday, a soldier or a sailor or a civilian might need someone with her skills to bring them home. She was doing this because the country she loved needed warriors who wouldn't quit when things got hard. She was doing this because she'd looked at that brass bell 1,000 times and knew that ringing it would haunt her forever. Day 4 brought surf torture sitting in the freezing ocean surf, while waves crashed over them for hours. Day 5 brought more runs, more obstacles, more moments when the bell whispered promises of warmth and rest. Louise made it through. So did Kate. When Hell Week finally ended, only a handful of the original class remained. Kate stood with them, barely able to stand upright, as Senior Chief Burke addressed the survivors. "You few have earned the right to continue," he said. "But this is just the beginning. The real test isn't physical strength. It's what's in here." He tapped his chest. "When you're in hostile territory and everything goes wrong, when your teammates are counting on you and your body wants to quit, what keeps you going? Figure that out, and you might just make it." His eyes found Kate's. There was something in his expression that might have been respect. She'd found her answer, and she wasn't letting go. 6 months into SEAL training, Kate Morrison had transformed. The woman who'd walked away from Fort Henderson was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, and utterly relentless. The pipeline was brutal. After Hell Week came die-phase land warfare. And finally, the advanced training that separated ordinary soldiers from naval special warfare operators. Kate excelled in ways that silenced the doubters. During maritime operations training, she proved to be a natural in the water, calm and efficient even during night dives in rough seas. But it was on the range where she truly shined. Chief Instructor Warren Mills watched through his binoculars as Kate took her position for a long-range marksmanship qualification. The target was 800 yards out, and the wind was picking up. She settled into her stance with the practiced ease of someone who'd been shooting since childhood. Her father had taught her to hunt when she was 10, and she'd spent countless hours in Nebraska fields learning to read wind, calculate distance, and control her breathing. The first shot was perfect center mass. So was the second. And the third. Mills lowered his binoculars and made a note in his file. He'd been training SEALs for 15 years and had seen plenty of good shooters. Kate Morrison wasn't just good. She was exceptional. "Morrison!" he called out. "Come here." Kate jogged over, her rifle slung across her back. The other candidates watched, some with respect, others with barely concealed resentment. She'd proven herself repeatedly, but there were still men in the class who couldn't accept a woman among them. "You ever considered sniper school?" Mills asked. Kate's eyes widened slightly. "I'd be honored, Chief." "Don't be honored yet. It's another 6 months of specialized training, and it's not a guarantee. But with your scores, you'd be a fool not to try." He paused. "You've come a long way from that Army lieutenant who showed up here looking for validation." I wasn't looking for validation, Chief, Kate said quietly. I was looking for a purpose. Mills nodded. And did you find it? Kate thought about the question. She thought about Liz, who'd made it through Hell Week but washed out during dive phase. Before he left, he thanked her for keeping him going that night on the beach. She thought about the other candidates who'd started to see her not as a woman trying to prove something, but as a teammate they could trust. Yes, Chief, I did. The months that followed were the hardest of Kate's life. Sniper school pushed her beyond anything she'd experienced. The physical demands were constant, but the mental pressure was worse. Snipers had to be patient, disciplined, and able to make life-or-death decisions in split seconds. They had to calculate wind, distance, humidity, and a dozen other variables while remaining perfectly still for hours. Kate thrived on her instructors, began to use her as an example for other students. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, to shut out distractions and focus entirely on the mission, was exactly what they were looking for. She graduated at the top of her class with scores that entered the record books, but the real test came during her first deployment. Kate was assigned to SEAL Team 7, stationed out of Coronado. The team leader, Commander Jack Sullivan, was a decorated veteran with 2 decades of experience. He'd been skeptical about having a woman on his team, but he was also a professional who judged people by their performance, not their gender. Morrison, welcome to 7, Sullivan said when she reported for duty. I've read your file. Impressive scores, but scores don't mean much until you've been downrange. You'll be working with Senior Chief Burke. I believe you know him from training. Kate's heart jumped. Burke had finished his rotation as an instructor and returned to active duty. She hadn't seen him since graduation. Yes, sir. I'm ready. We'll see. We ship out to the Middle East in 2 weeks. Keep your head down, do your job, and prove you belong here. The deployment was everything Kate had trained for. The team operated in hostile territory, conducting reconnaissance and direct action missions. Kate served as one of the team's designated marksmen, providing overwatch while the others moved in close. On her 3rd mission, everything went wrong. The team was extracting a high-value target from a compound in enemy territory when they walked into an ambush. Gunfire erupted from 3 different positions, pinning the team down. 2 SEALs were wounded in the first seconds. Kate was positioned on a rooftop 400 yards away, a rifle trained on the compound. Through her scope, she could see her teammates scrambling for cover, see the muzzle flashes from enemy positions. Morrison, we need those guns silenced now. Sullivan's voice crackled over the radio, strained with urgency. Kate's training took over. She shut out the chaos, the fear, the knowledge that her teammates were dying. She found her first target, an enemy fighter on a balcony firing down at her team. She adjusted for wind and distance, exhaled slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The fighter dropped. She moved to the next target. Then the next. Within 90 seconds, she'd eliminated 4 enemy combatants and suppressed the ambush enough for her team to reach cover and return fire. Good shooting, Morrison. Burke's voice came over the radio. Keep us covered while we move. For the next 20 minutes, Kate provided precision fire that allowed her team to maneuver, recover their wounded, and complete the extraction. By the time they reached the helicopters, she'd taken out 11 enemy fighters without a single missed shot. Back at base, Commander Sullivan pulled her aside. That was exceptional work out there, Morrison. You saved lives today. Kate nodded, but she didn't feel triumphant. She felt the weight of what she'd done, the lives she'd taken to protect her brothers in arms. It was what she'd trained for, what she'd signed up for, but that didn't make it easy. The team knows what you did for them, Sullivan continued. You're one of us now. Really one of us. It was the acceptance Kate had once craved from Captain Stone and Bravo Company. But now, having truly earned it through blood and sacrifice, She understood that it meant something far deeper than she'd ever imagined. She was a Navy SEAL, and she'd proven she belonged. 3 years after leaving Fort Henderson in disgrace, Kate Morrison returned to the United States a different person. She'd completed multiple deployments, earned commendations for valor, and established herself as one of the most skilled snipers in naval special warfare. Her reputation preceded her, the quiet professional who never missed, who kept her teammates alive through impossible situations. But success didn't erase the past. Kate was home on leave, visiting her parents in Nebraska when she got the call. She was sitting on her childhood porch, watching the sunset paint the wheat fields gold, when her phone rang. The number was from Fort Henderson. "Lieutenant Morrison? This is Colonel Patricia Grant, commander of Fort Henderson. I apologize for disturbing your leave, but we have a situation that requires someone with your specific expertise." Kate sat up straighter. "What kind of situation, ma'am?" "A training exercise gone wrong. We have 4 soldiers trapped in rough terrain, injured, with a storm system moving in. We need a search and rescue operation, and we need someone who can navigate difficult country and provide medical support if needed. Your name came up. Your record with the SEALs is extraordinary." Kate's mind raced. Fort Henderson, the base where she'd been humiliated and abandoned. "Ma'am, there are plenty of qualified personnel who could handle that mission. Not like you, Lieutenant. You're one of the best-trained rescue operators in the military, and you know the terrain around Henderson from your time here. The trapped soldiers are from Bravo Company." Kate's blood went cold. "Bravo Company?" "Yes, Captain Stone's unit. They were running an unauthorized training exercise in the backcountry, went off the grid, and now we have 4 men injured, including Stone himself. The weather's deteriorating fast, and we're looking at a potential fatality situation if we don't get them out in the next 12 hours. Kate stood and walked to the porch railing, gripping it with white knuckles. Derek Stone, the man who'd left her in the rain and told her she didn't belong, was now trapped and injured. The irony was almost too perfect. "Lieutenant Morrison? Are you there?" Kate thought about everything she'd been through. The abandonment, the grueling training, the missions where she'd risked her life for teammates who trusted her. She thought about what Burke had told her during Hell Week, that revenge wasn't good enough, that she needed a better reason. "I'll do it," she said. "But I lead the operation." "My way." "Understood. We have a helicopter waiting to bring you in." 6 hours later, Kate was at Fort Henderson, standing in the operations center with Colonel Grant and a handful of senior officers. Maps covered the tables, showing the rough terrain where Bravo Company was stranded. The weather report was grim, a major storm system moving in, temperatures dropping, visibility near zero. "Here's what we know," Colonel Grant said, pointing to the map. Stone took 3 men on what he called an extreme endurance exercise. They were trying to prove something. Apparently, there's been some talk about standards being lowered, about whether certain soldiers could handle real combat conditions. Kate said nothing, but she understood. Stone was still fighting his war against progress, still trying to prove that his old-school way was the only way. "They got caught in a rock slide around here," Grant continued, indicating a canyon area. 2 men have broken bones. One has a head injury, and Stone himself has a suspected spinal injury. They're sheltered, but in bad shape. Standard rescue teams can't reach them in these conditions. Too dangerous, too technical. But a SEAL with mountain warfare training might have a chance. "I'll need 2 people," Kate said. "People I can trust who can handle difficult terrain. You can handpick your team from anyone on base." Kate scanned the faces in the room. Most were strangers, but then she saw a familiar face, Tim Hayes, now a sergeant, who'd walked with her through that storm 3 years ago. He met her eyes and nodded slightly. "Hayes," she said, "and I'll need someone from the medical unit with field experience." They assembled quickly. Kate briefed her small team on the plan, laying out the route, the risks, and the timeline. They had 8 hours before the weather made any rescue impossible. As they prepared to move out, a Lieutenant Colonel Kate didn't recognize approached her. "Lieutenant Morrison, I just want you to know what happened to you 3 years ago was wrong." Captain Stone faced administrative action over that incident, though it wasn't enough in my opinion. But a lot of people on this base remember. They remember how you were treated, and they remember that you went on to become something extraordinary. Kate nodded. "Thank you, sir. But this isn't about the past. It's about bringing 4 soldiers home." "Still," the officer said, "there's a certain poetry to this, isn't there? The woman they left behind is now the only one who can save them." Kate shouldered her pack and headed for the door. "Poetry's not my concern, sir. Getting my job done is." The journey into the mountains was brutal. The storm hit harder and faster than predicted, turning the terrain into a nightmare of rain, wind, and limited visibility. But Kate had faced worse. She led her team with confidence, using her training to navigate the treacherous paths. They found Bravo Company 6 hours in, huddled in a shallow cave, hypothermic and in pain. Captain Stone was barely conscious, his face pale with shock. When he saw Kate emerge from the storm, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Morrison?" he whispered. Kate knelt beside him, immediately assessing his injuries with professional efficiency. "Don't move, Captain. You've got a spinal injury. We're going to stabilize you and get you out of here." You came?" "It's my job," Kate said simply, already working with her medic to secure Stone's neck and back. Over the next 3 hours, Kate coordinated a rescue that required every bit of her training. She rigged lines, directed the evacuation of each wounded man, and maintained constant communication with the base. When Stone's condition began to deteriorate, she made the call to request emergency helicopter extraction, despite the dangerous weather. By the time they reached the base hospital, all 4 men were stable. Kate had saved their lives, and Derek Stone would spend the rest of his career knowing it. The debriefing happened 2 days later in Colonel Grant's office. Kate stood at attention, exhausted but composed while Grant reviewed the mission report. Captain Stone was in the hospital, recovering from surgery, but the other 3 rescued soldiers were present, along with several senior officers. "Lieutenant Morrison," Colonel Grant began, "what you accomplished during that rescue was nothing short of extraordinary. You navigated impossible terrain in horrible conditions and saved 4 lives. The Army doesn't have enough words to express its gratitude." "Thank you, ma'am. I was doing my duty." Grant leaned back in her chair. "Your duty?" "Yes, let's talk about that." She glanced at the others in the room. 3 years ago, you left this base under circumstances that frankly embarrassed this command. You were treated poorly by members of your unit, subjected to discrimination, and ultimately abandoned during a training exercise. You had every right to be bitter, to refuse this mission, to let Stone and his men face the consequences of their attitudes. Kate remained silent, waiting. Instead, Grant continued, you put personal history aside and did what a true soldier does. You saved lives, regardless of personal feelings. That's the kind of character we should all aspire to. One of the rescued soldiers, a young Private Kate didn't recognize, spoke up. "Ma'am, if I may? Lieutenant Morrison didn't just save us. She carried me half a mile on her back when I couldn't walk. She talked me through the pain, kept me focused. She's the real deal." Grant nodded. "Which brings me to why you're all here. Lieutenant Morrison, the Navy has offered you a position training SEAL candidates. It's prestigious, important work. But I'm here to make you a different offer." Kate's attention sharpened. "We're forming a new Joint Special Operations Unit focused on high-risk rescue and reconnaissance. It'll draw personnel from all branches, SEALs, Rangers, Special Forces. We want you to help lead it. It would mean a promotion to captain and a return to the Army, but with full autonomy and the respect you've earned 10 times over." The room was silent. Kate thought about the offer, about coming full circle to where her journey had begun. She thought about the SEALs who'd become her family, and about the soldiers who needed someone to prove that excellence knew no gender. "May I speak to Captain Stone before I decide?" Kate asked. Grant seemed surprised but nodded. "Of course." An hour later, Kate stood in Stone's hospital room. He was awake, strapped to a bed that kept his spine immobilized. When he saw her, something like shame crossed his face. "Morrison, they told me you saved my life. I did my job," Kate said evenly. "No," Stone's voice was rough. "You did more than that. You could have let us die out there. God knows I deserved it after how I treated you." Kate pulled up a chair. "Captain, I'm not going to lie and say what you did didn't hurt. It did. You made me doubt myself, made me feel like I had to prove my worth every single day. But you also did me a favor." Stone looked confused. "How?" "You showed me that I was seeking acceptance from the wrong people. You pushed me out of my comfort zone and onto a path that made me stronger than I ever thought possible. I became a Navy SEAL not to prove you wrong, but to prove to myself that I could rise above small-minded thinking." Stone closed his eyes. "I was wrong about you, about women in combat. I was wrong about a lot of things. Yes, you were. But you can be right from now on." Kate stood. "The Army is changing, Captain. People like me aren't going away. The question is whether people like you will change with it, or whether you'll get left behind like you left me in that storm." "What will you do?" Stone asked. "Will you take their offer?" Kate walked to the window, looking out at Fort Henderson. She thought about the scared, angry lieutenant who'd walked away from here 3 years ago. She thought about Hell Week, about Burke's wisdom, about the missions where she'd proven her worth not through words, but through action. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But whatever I decide, it'll be because it's what's best for the mission and the people I serve with. Not because I have anything left to prove to you or anyone else." She turned back to Stone. "Get well, Captain. And when you do, maybe think about what kind of leader you want to be. One who tears people down or one who builds them up." Kate left the hospital and walked across the base. Soldiers passed her, some recognizing her from the rescue, others just seeing another officer. But she walked differently now, with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was. Her phone rang. It was Senior Chief Burke. "Morrison, I heard about the rescue." "Impressive work. Thank you, Senior Chief. I also heard about the Army's offer." "What are you going to do?" Kate smiled. "What would you do?" Burke was quiet for a moment. "I'd ask myself what serves the mission best. Where can you make the biggest difference?" "That's what I thought you'd say. Whatever you decide, Morrison, you've already done something more important than any mission. You've shown everyone that excellence doesn't care about gender, politics, or prejudice. Excellence is just excellence. And you've got it in spades." 2 weeks later, Kate made her decision. She accepted the Army's offer on one condition, that the new unit would recruit and train the very best operators regardless of background, and that she'd have full authority to build a program that valued skill and character above everything else. Colonel Grant agreed immediately. 6 months later, the Joint Special Operations Rescue Unit was operational. Kate, now Captain Morrison, stood before her first class of candidates, men and women from every branch of the military, each one hungry to prove themselves worthy of the most elite training available. Among the observers was Derek Stone, recovered from his injuries and assigned to Fort Henderson's training command. He watched Kate address her troops with an expression that might have been respect or maybe just the humility of a man who'd learned an expensive lesson. "Welcome to JSORU," Kate told her candidates. "This program will break you down and build you back up. It'll test everything you think you know about yourself. Some of you will fail. That's not a judgment on your worth as a person, it's just reality. But those who make it through will be part of something special. You'll be warriors who prove that excellence comes in all forms, from all backgrounds." She paused, looking at the mix of faces before her, young and old, male and female. Every color and creed represented. 3 years ago, I was left behind in a storm by people who didn't think I belonged. I could have let that break me. Instead, I let it forge me into something stronger. Each of you will face moments like that in your life, moments when someone tells you that you're not good enough, that you don't belong, that you should quit. What you do in those moments defines who you are. A young female candidate in the front row raised her hand. "Ma'am, how did you keep going when everyone doubted you?" Kate smiled, thinking back to that night on the cold beach during Hell Week, to Burke's wisdom, to all the moments when quitting would have been easier than pushing forward. "I found a purpose bigger than myself. I stopped trying to prove I belonged and started focusing on being the best I could be for the people who needed me. That's what I want each of you to discover here. Not just that you're tough enough or skilled enough, but why you're willing to suffer for something greater than yourself." The training began the next day. It was brutal, uncompromising, and fair. Kate ran her program with the same intensity she'd experienced as a SEAL candidate. But with one crucial difference: every person was judged solely on their performance, their character, and their heart. By the end of the first year, JSORU had developed a reputation as one of the most elite units in the military. Its operators were deployed to conflict zones around the world, conducting rescues and missions that others couldn't or wouldn't attempt. And leading many of those missions was Captain Kate Morrison, the woman who'd been left behind in the rain and had returned as someone no one could ignore. One evening, as Kate reviewed mission reports in her office, there was a knock on her door. It was Derek Stone. "Captain Morrison, do you have a minute?" Kate gestured to a chair. Stone sat, looking older and somehow smaller than she remembered. "I'm retiring next month," he said. 25 years in the Army, and I'm finally hanging it up. "Congratulations, Captain. I wanted to talk to you before I left. To really apologize, not just for what I did 3 years ago, but for what I represented. I was so stuck in my ways, so convinced that I knew what a warrior looked like, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." Kate set down her papers. "You weren't the first, and you won't be the last, Captain. Old thinking dies hard. Maybe, but watching what you've built here, seeing the operators you've trained, both men and women going out and succeeding on the most dangerous missions imaginable, it's made me realize how much talent the military wasted over the years because of people like me. The important thing is that you learned," Kate said. "That's all any of us can do, learn and grow and become better than we were." Stone stood, extending his hand. "I just wanted you to know what you did, refusing to let us break you, refusing to become bitter. You didn't just save my life that day in the mountains. You saved something in me too. You showed me that real strength isn't about being the toughest or the most rigid. It's about being good enough to rise above the people who try to hold you down." Kate shook his hand. "Take care of yourself, Captain." After he left, Kate returned to her reports, but her mind wandered. She thought about that rainy night at Fort Henderson, about the long walk back to base, about every moment since then that had led her here. The abandonment, the suffering, the triumphs, all of it had been necessary to forge her into the leader she'd become. Her phone buzzed with a message from Burke. "Heard you turned down a promotion to Admiral's staff. You really prefer the field?" Kate smiled and typed back. Someone has to show these kids how it's done. Outside her window, she could see her newest class of candidates running the obstacle course in the fading light. They were suffering, pushing their bodies and minds to the limit, discovering who they really were beneath the fear and exhaustion. And Kate Morrison, once abandoned and mocked, now watched over them with pride, a warrior who'd proven that the only person whose opinion truly mattered was the one staring back from the mirror each morning. She'd found her purpose, earned her place, and opened doors for everyone who would follow. The rain had made her stronger. The abandonment had set her free. And the journey back had shown everyone that excellence knows no limits but the ones we place on ourselves.